When it rains, the siren sounds sharper. Maybe because the raindrops bounce the sound back. Or maybe because I'm the one who's become sensitive. Red lights stretch across the wet asphalt, like blood bleeding outward. Taiyo, Unit 3. Team Leader Choi's voice tore through the radio. I ran. While I run, thoughts shrink. Only numbers remain. Respiratory rate, level of consciousness, skin color, capillary refill time. The scene is not emotion. It's a checklist. A vehicle had licked the guardrail, spun out, and been half torn open. There was a person inside. The angle of the neck, drool sliding beneath the jaw, eyes unfocused. SPO 83. I dropped to my knees, lifted the chin, opened the airway. My fingertips moved like a machine. My hands don't hate blood. They don't fear fire or screams. Some call it bravery. Some call it cold-bloodedness. I know what it is. It's just that part inside me is switched off. Pheromones. They say the whole world runs on them. Alphas recognize alphas. Omegas sense omegas. People are pulled towards certain people. And those instinctive connections tie one person to another. But I can't feel anything. I am alpha, strong pheromones with me, but I don't feel anything. Even if someone goes into heat right beside me, even if someone leaks rut in the air, my body doesn't respond. My heart beats the same. I sweat the same. My head stays the same cold. So on scene, I become the perfect human. When others shake, I don't. The problem is, not shaking leaves an empty space inside me. Teo, transport. We loaded the patient onto the stretcher and pushed into the ambulance. The door shut. Interior lights snapped on. The oxygen mask exhaled white fog. BP 90/60. Pulse 128. I read the numbers. Then I turn the numbers into sentences to deliver to the next destination. 7 minutes to ER. Airway maintained. Possible chest trauma. Decreased consciousness. The words were simple. In this world, the most important thing is simplicity. Then the ambulance took a hard curve, a short lurch. I pressed my hand down on the patient's shoulder to stabilize him. And in that moment, just barely, a strange foreboding brushed past me. Today feels like it's going to be an unusual day. That feeling is never wrong. The automatic doors of the ER always open at the same speed. That speed is what I like about them. Predictable, repetitive, mechanical. I pushed the stretcher in. The air was a mix of antiseptic and blood. Bodies bumping, voices colliding. Monitor alarms. Trauma coming in. My voice cut through the room and someone lifted a hand. Here, no one in the ER is allowed to shake. If you shake, people die. Their focus is like a blade. But between those blades, I saw one person who couldn't breathe properly. Yoon Seoha. White coat, stethoscope hanging like a necklace. Fatigue under his eyes. Lips pressed thin. Shoulders slightly lifted. A posture of holding something back. And somehow that caught my eyes. Patient condition. I started my report. He nodded, absorbing each number and word. Precise. Clean. Perfect, like an ideal doctor. But the moment he stepped closer, my head became strangely clear. To be exact, it wasn't that it became clear. I'm always clear, always cold, always exact. But this clarity was a different kind. Like the moment right before deep sleep, when your body sinks into the blanket and whispers, "Ah, it's okay now." My heart slowed. I distrusted my body for a second. Adrenaline drop timing? Post-scene release? Fatigue? But my body doesn't collapse like that. I don't loosen like that. And yet I did, only while Yoon Seoha stood beside me. I'll confirm. His voice was low. That low tone was strangely steady, and I felt that steadiness, stroking my nervous system. It wasn't desire, not attraction, just stability. I'm insensitive to pheromones. No scent can shake me. But now it wasn't scent. His presence was pressing down on my pulse. Yoon Seoha pressed on the patient's chest. Tendons rose in his wrist. That wrist trembled. I saw it. So small, almost nothing. But every time he inhaled, his chest hitched. "Doctor," a nurse came closer. "Doctor, are you okay?" Yoon Seoha shook his head quickly. "I'm fine. Keep going. Fine." In the field and in the ER, that word is the most common lie. I've seen it so many times. I know it's speed. Right before it comes out, the eyes flickered just once. Yoon Seoha's eyes flickered too. That was enough. After the handover, I tried to pull the stretcher out, but my feet stopped. Yoon Seoha swallowed again. A thin sheen of sweat formed above his collarbone. That sweat didn't come to me as scent, but my body read it like a signal. Danger. He's holding something back. And what he's holding back will burst someday. Paramedic. He called me. His voice was slightly rough. 1 millimeter of his polished ER doctor surface peeled away. Yes, your report was very clear. He bowed his head. Just an acknowledgement. But the air attached to it felt different. When gratitude is delivered, without the word thank you, people look more vulnerable. I don't know when I started noticing vulnerability this closely. Doctor, I opened my mouth, and I didn't even know what I was about to say. Yoon Seoha looked at me. Those eyes weren't wary. They were fear. When is your next shift? The question slipped out. It wasn't like me. I don't ask hospital staff about their schedules. I'm the one who reports and transports. But I was asking. His eyes widened, barely. He hesitated, then glanced at the nurse and said quietly, "Until tomorrow dawn." I nodded. I wanted to say something, but nothing came out. My body was still stable. Just because he was near, Yoon Seoha turned back to the patient. And in that moment, I felt my hand, for a split second, move toward his elbow. I wanted to grab him, because he might fall, because he might stop breathing, because he might break. I pulled my hand back. Instead, I clenched my gloves. For an alpha who can't sense anything, this impulse felt like a defective part. That night, I couldn't sleep even after going home. Even with hot water beating down my back in the shower, my brain replayed one person. Yoon Seoha. The throat swallowing air, the trembling wrist, the eyes that weren't okay while saying, "I'm fine." I took water from the fridge and drank. Even as cold water slid down my throat, something inside me stayed hot. It was strange. My body is always consistent. So I tried to diagnose it. If I find the cause, I can fix it. Relaxation response after acute stress. Environmental shift, fatigue. All wrong. Only beside Yoon Seoha. Did I become stable? That was the problem. Because I'm not someone who needs stability. I've always been stable. But if there's such a thing as stability that grows deeper, maybe that means I've lost something inside me. Or maybe it means I'm finding what I lost. The next day, I passed by the ER. There was no reason. Not because the ambulance bay was there. I just wanted to pass by. The automatic doors opened. Wind brushed my face, and between them I saw Yoon Seoha. He was holding coffee, but his hand, gripping the cup, trembled slightly. I stopped. "Doctor." He looked up. Startled then, he quickly fixed his expression. "Yesterday paramedic. Kang Taeyo." When I said my name, he stared at my face a little longer. Yoon Seoha. The way he said it wasn't just greeting. It was closer to lowering his guard. The moment I heard his name, I felt it again. Stability. My heart quieted. The tension behind my neck loosened. My shoulders dropped. Did he notice my change? Probably not, because even I had never experienced someone changing my body like this. "Coffee, are you okay?" My question was strange. Is coffee okay? But what I wanted to ask wasn't about coffee. It was about him. Yoon Seoha gave a short laugh. His laugh was pretty. And that laugh pushed oxygen into my lungs. "Yes, I'm fine." That word again. This time I didn't let it pass. "You're not fine." His laughter stopped. His eyes trembled. That tremble was the direction of escape. What? Hand tremor. Shallow breathing. Dilated pupils. Sweat. I listed them. The way I read humans, not by instinct, but by data. "You need to rest. Now." His face hardened. He said low, "Are you evaluating me?" His tone was cold, but inside it was embarrassment. The sound someone makes when their weakness is exposed. I shook my head. Not evaluation. I paused, then chose honesty, detection. When I said that, his throat moved. He swallowed. "It's fine." He said it again, this time gripping it like a rope. "I know what happens when something hard breaks. Hard things break louder." "Dr. Yoon Seoha." I said his name slowly, on purpose. His shoulders lowered a fraction. In that moment, time stopped for just us. People passed. Doors opened and closed. The world kept moving loud. Only we were still. Yoon Seoha looked away first. "Just come with me." He walked down a side hall with his coffee. I followed. At the end was a small staff break room. Old sofa. Wet wipes. A damp blanket smell. He closed the door, and the ER noise peeled away one layer. The world got farther. This is staff only, so he stopped mid-sentence, inhaled sharply, and pressed a hand to his chest. This was a sign. I moved closer. Too fast. Sit. I'm fine. Sit. My voice dropped lower than usual. It might have sounded like an order. He sat. His knees trembled faintly. I crouched in front of him, not to hear his heart, but so he wouldn't fall. Pulse. My hand went to his wrist. He flinched. That flinch was an Omega's instinctive caution. The world is always a threat to Omegas. But I'm an alpha who doesn't react. My touch moved to check, not to want. Maybe that reached him. He loosened, little by little. Under my fingertips, his pulse was too fast. Doctor, suppressants. His eyes widened. How do you? I exhaled instead of answering. Guess. Then I said it too direct, maybe too much to hear. Side effects. He turned his head away. His eyes reddened. Shame, anger, fear, all flooding at once. And then my body stabilized again. The closer he was, the quieter my heart became. So strange that it made me certain. I needed him. He said low, as a doctor, I have to be perfect. There's no perfect doctor. My answer was too blunt. He made a short sound that was almost a laugh, almost a cry. I have to believe there is, or I can't endure. It sounded like a confession that meant, if I don't push myself, I collapse. That confession struck something inside my chest. Emotion comes late to me. But when it comes, I don't know what to do with it. I let go of his wrist and said carefully, breathe. He inhaled. His chest hitched. I slowed my own breathing to match his. 1, 2. Surprisingly, his breathing matched mine. The air in the break room changed. Like the instinct alarm that's always broken in the ER. Turned off for a moment. He looked at me. Those eyes asked, why are you safe? I couldn't answer. I didn't know either. When his breathing eased, he lowered his head. I shouldn't show you this. That sentence pulled me closer. Without thinking, I reached toward his forehead. Damp hair stuck to his skin. My fingers brushed it back. Yoon Seoha stopped breathing. Exactly 1 second. And that 1 second was so long. My fingertips turned hot. Are you? When I couldn't continue, he asked low, why are you so close? The question was a boundary. And also permission. I pulled my hand back, afraid it would be too obvious. But it was already too late. His throat had flushed red. He inhaled again. That breath trembled. Paramedic. You can call me Tayo. The words slipped out. I didn't know why I said them. He stared at me. His lips parted slightly. Tayo. The moment my name entered my ears from his mouth, I felt something inside me quietly crumble. It wasn't desire. Still, it was too close, too comfortable, and that made it more dangerous. A sound of footsteps passed outside the door. Yoon Seoha snapped back into reality and stood up. I have to go. He straightened his coat, reset his face into doctor. I watched him put the armor back on, and I wanted to lift its weight off him. Wait, I caught his wrist. This time it wasn't a check. It was to stop him. He looked startled. I spoke fast. Water. I poured water and handed it to him. He drank. His throat bobbed. That movement lodged in my vision. He set the cup down and said low, if this gets out, it'll be a problem. In what way? His eyes shook. If an Omega looks weak, people step on you easier. That was experience speaking. He had the eyes of someone who'd been stepped on too many times. I nodded slowly. Then let's make rules. He looked at me. Rules? Yes. I spoke the language I know best. Not emotion structure. Outside the ER, we do protocol checks. If you show warning signs, you rest immediately. Suppressants adjust with medical staff. And I paused. He asked softly, and? I looked straight at him. I think you stabilize when I'm beside you. His eyes widened. He let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. That doesn't make sense. I thought so too. And? The data makes sense. At that, the corner of his lips lifted barely. That tiny lift felt like a major event to me. After that day, I started passing by the ER often, even when I wasn't on shift, even when there were no calls. I didn't want to know the reason. Because if I knew, I might have to stop. Yoon Seoha avoided me at first. But even while avoiding me, his eyes looked for me. Every time the automatic doors opened, he reflexively lifted his head, then dropped his gaze fast if he saw me. That motion was exactly half a second slow. On scene, I learned this. When someone avoids, they don't fully avoid. They check first, then avoid. You have to confirm what you fear before you can run from it. Tayo, no dispatch? Take 5 minutes. Team leader Choi said. I answered yes, but I didn't rest. I walked past the ER doors. That kind of route doesn't need a reason. If I believe it's just my path, a strange habit looks normal. The doors opened again. Wind brushed my face and antiseptic stabbed my lungs. And there was Yoon Seoha, white coat, stethoscope, tired eyes. He held coffee. Today his hand trembled less. That fact quieted my heart. Dr. Yoon Seoha. When I said his name, his shoulders lowered slightly. He didn't answer, just nodded. Perfect doctors don't answer long. Today you seem a bit better. My question wasn't really a question. It was confirmation. He gave a brief, thin smile. Are you a doctor? No. I shook my head. But I've seen more emergencies. I added quickly, afraid it would sound arrogant. I don't mean I'm treating you like a patient. He looked at me. A thin boundary returned to his eyes. Then what do you mean? It means I might notice you collapsing first. His lips hardened. He's someone who survives on perfect. To someone like him, you might collapse. Sounds like a curse. He said low. Don't say things like that lightly. I'm not saying it lightly. I didn't look away. Because the data is there. He exhaled. That breath smelled like, don't touch me. And, please look at me. Mixed together, an Omega's defense is always double. That night, the ER was briefly quiet. Quiet is more dangerous. In quiet, you hear your own body. Yoon Seoha sat in front of a monitor, reading charts. His sleeve rode up. His wrist showed. I remembered the first time I saw it. That pulse racing under my fingers. I stopped at the door. This is a restricted area, he said without looking up. But he knew exactly I was there. Just a moment, I said low. I walked by and your breathing looked shallow. He slid his chair back, stood slowly, carefully. You really have sharp eyes. It sounded like sarcasm, but his voice trembled. I stepped closer, but kept one step of distance. Sit for a moment. He lifted his gaze. His eyes pierced me. If you do this here, people will talk. That mattered. The ER saves lives, and it also kills people fastest. With rumors. Then somewhere quieter. He hesitated, then whispered, that break room. When the door shut, the air changed. He sat. This time, it wasn't because he was about to collapse. It was because he was afraid he might. He rubbed his throat. Whether from suppressants or tension, his Adam's apple moved too often. Why are you like this? He asked suddenly. What? Why do you look at me like that? I couldn't find an answer. I'd never looked at anyone like that. On scene, I look at people only as, can I save them? But Yoon Seoha looked like, can he survive? Doctor? I stopped. He lifted his head. His eyes were red. That redness made me oddly impatient. Am I making you shake? He asked. That was Omega defense. Say I'm the problem first, so the other person can't say it. I shook my head. No. Then why? I exhaled. I'm insensitive to pheromones. His eyes shook. Not toward defense, toward understanding. I know. He said low. That's what scares me more. Why? He made a sound that wasn't a laugh. Omega's judged by reaction. He brushed his own arm like erasing a mark. If someone wants me and comes close danger. If someone doesn't want me safe. He looked up. But you... He stopped. Don't want me, but you come close. The air thickened. My body went quiet again. To an Omega, that's the most incomprehensible type. It's not that I don't want. The words escaped too fast. He widened his eyes. I corrected myself. I mean, not in the way the world defines want. His lips parted slightly. Then what way? I didn't answer. I looked at his wrist. Pulse. He stopped breathing. I reached out. This time, too, the excuse was checking. The moment my fingertips touched his wrist, he flinched barely. That flinch was caution. And also waiting. Even through gloves, I felt warmth. He was hot. I'm usually indifferent to temperature. But this I felt. His pulse was slower than yesterday. The moment I confirmed it, something in my chest loosened. That looseness had the shape of desire. I tried to pull away. But he said very softly, if you touch me like that. Yes? His eyes were locked on my fingertips. I'll misunderstand. He said it too late. The room was already filled with misunderstanding. I couldn't pull away. If I did, it felt like he'd break. That was an excuse. I hid the truth. That I didn't want to pull away. It's okay if you misunderstand. My mouth said it first. He inhaled. That breath trembled. Paramedic! Tayo! Tayo! He said my name again. My name made my head clear. That clarity was so comfortable I stepped closer. The distance between our knees was one palm. He didn't retreat. I didn't know if it was permission or surrender. He bit his lip. This isn't allowed. Why? I'm an Omega. He trailed off. I knew the rest. Because he's an Omega, anything can happen. Because he's an Omega, rumors spread. Because he's an Omega, weakness is easy. I stopped, then chose the simplest sentence. I need you. His eyes shook. Not to run. To fall apart. Footsteps passed outside the door. He tried to yank his wrist away. I released him immediately. He stood quickly, straightened his coat, fixed his face. We can't repeat this, he said. I nodded. Let's make rules. He looked at me. Rules? Professional during work. Obviously. Outside work protocol. His eyes widened a fraction. If we call it protocol, it's less dangerous. He smiled briefly. You really are. The sentence didn't finish. He moved toward the door, then stopped. And in a very low voice, he said, But Tayo. Yes. When you're beside me, I really do stabilize. That sentence made something inside me collapse slowly. I exhaled. Me too. That was the bigger problem. He became doctor the moment we left the room. Smoothed his coat, locked his expression, evened his voice. But I saw it. His fingertips still trembled barely. And that tremble wasn't just fatigue. Tayo. As he walked toward the ER, he said low, Forget what happened today. I can't. My answer came too fast. He stopped. Why? I exhaled. Unseen, the body moves before reasons. But now, I needed a reason. Your collapse isn't an accident. It's a pattern. His eyes shook. For a moment, that shake tried to become anger. Then his face went pale. And very briefly, he pressed his hand to the back of his neck. A sign. The foreboding I felt that first day finally landed with precision. He bit his lip. Tayo, just go. His words were cold, but his eyes were wet. That look didn't mean go. It meant hold me. I stepped closer. Doctor, right now? He shook his head. No, not yet. That not yet was dangerous. When people say not yet, they're already halfway over the edge. Then a voice called from the ER. Dr. Yoon! Yoon Seoha straightened instinctively. And in that moment, his breathing stuttered hard. His pupils widened. His skin flushed thinly. I read it as data. Before heat hits, an Omega's body can't hide. He whispered to me, Tiny, don't. That wasn't to me. That was to his own body. Yoon Seoha went into the ER. I should have left. That's where I belong. But my feet wouldn't move. That part inside me is off. Scent. Instinct. Stimulation. And yet, the sight of him standing over charts with his head lowered was lifting some switch in me slowly. Stability. The closer I was, the quieter I became. Not normal quiet. The kind of quiet before a storm. When the sea goes still for a second. That's when I understood. Maybe I'm not numb. Maybe I'm the kind of person whose senses turn on for only one person. And that person was breaking. Inside the ER, patients came and went, sounds crashing. Yoon Seoha pressed his neck again and again. Suppressant marks. A habit of hiding. A survival tic of someone who endures. Then a small incident finally happened. He tried to pull out the medication. His hand trembled and dropped it. A capsule rolled across the floor. The sound was louder than it should have been. Doctor? A nurse came close. Yoon Seoha smiled instantly. I'm fine. That word again. That moment. I decided. Not this time. I stepped into the ER. It wasn't my permitted route. But I learned on scene. Rules don't save people. People save people. As he reached for the capsule, my hand got there first. I picked it up. His eyes snapped up. Taeyo. Break room. My voice was short. Almost an order. He clenched his jaw. Here, if you collapse here, the rumor is bigger. His face hardened. He didn't want to accept it, but he knew reality too well. He nodded once. We moved fast through people. His pace was quick, but his center wobbled. Every time he wavered, my body moved closer reflexively. I want to grab him, so he doesn't fall, so he doesn't stop breathing. But it wasn't just safety. The closer his body came, the more something woke under my skin. A sensation I hated. A sensation I avoided my whole life. The shadow of instinct. When the break room door shut, he immediately braced the wall. His breathing was shallow. Pressing his neck, he said low, Daeyo, I really… The sentence broke, and in that instant the air changed. Even I, who can't smell, could feel the density shift. His eyes were wet. Run or stay? I couldn't run. Yoon Seoha inhaled hard. That breath trembled and touched me. And then, something inside me that had been off for a long time began to ignite slowly. I still can't smell scent. But when I saw Yoon Seoha breaking in front of me, my body chose. I have to protect him. That choice came out in an alpha's way. Heat rose behind my neck. A flush surged under my skin. His eyes widened. Daeyo, he swallowed and said, trembling low. Right now? I didn't let him finish. I locked the door. He looked at me. That gaze was fear, and also salvation. I stepped back one pace, deliberately creating distance. Then I said the most important things. Dr. Yoon Seoha, from now on, I only do what you want. If you don't want it, we stop. If you say it, we stop immediately. His lips trembled. I'm scared. Of what? My body being faster than my mind. I nodded. If you deny it, you break more. Then I'll match the speed so your mind can catch up. He exhaled. That breath loosened just a little. Then he covered the back of his neck. An omega habit. Protection. Hiding. That posture stabbed my heart. I said carefully, if you take suppressants right now, it could be more dangerous. Your body is already overloaded. He shook his head. But if I stay like this, if you stay like this, I'm here. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. It surprised him too. He let out a breath that almost sounded like laughter. You're really strange. Yes, I admitted. Because of you. His eyes shook wide. And very softly he asked, because of me, why? I didn't search for an answer. I stated the fact. When you're beside me, my heart slows. I'm not someone whose heart should slow. He stopped breathing. Then slowly he placed his hand on my wrist. A trembling hand. That one touch quietly destroyed something inside me. He said low, then, when I'm beside you, I get my breath back too. That was permission. His heat climbed. He held onto the edge of the sofa like he was enduring something familiar. That familiarity made it more dangerous. I moved closer slowly, not rushing, but undeniably. He looked up at me. His eyes said, help me. I lowered to my knees in front of him. Hands careful, so careful. Dr. Yoon Seoha. Can I come closer? He nodded, breath trembling. Yeah, come. One syllable. And something inside me flowed deeper. Even though I couldn't smell scent, I saw him inhale bigger, as if his body was accepting me, my alphaness, through breath. Sweat gathered on his forehead. I brushed his damp hair back slowly. He held his breath, then exhaled again. That breath grazed my throat, and for the first time I shook too. Not from fear, from the unfamiliarity of feeling something after so long. He said low, Daeyo, right now. I want you closer. It didn't sound like lust. It sounded like a request for safety. I took his hand. This time it wasn't a check. It was support. Okay. Then I added very low, but I'll keep checking. Are you okay? Should we stop? He shook his head. His eyes were wet. Don't stop. I stored that sentence deep inside me. Like an on-scene command I had to remember. My forehead touched his. Breath to breath close. Words weren't needed. He gripped my hand harder. Like someone grabbing an anchor not to drift away. Then, in a small broken voice, he said, I can smell your scent. I froze. I can't feel anything. He shook his head. That's what makes me crazier. You don't know, but my body does. That was dangerously sweet. So I had to become firmer. I whispered near his ear. Doctor, right now, it's not your body choosing. It has to be you. He looked into my eyes, breath shaking. I choose. Daeyo. That was when the part inside me fully turned on. Not for scent, for Yoon Seoha as a person. From here, instead of explicit description, we fade out, leaving only breath, body heat, holding on, and the feeling of sinking into each other's presence. His hand rose to the back of my neck, trembling but certain. I placed my hand over his, a sign I wouldn't run. He swallowed and smiled a little. You're really like my safety device. I didn't answer. I matched my breathing to his so his breath wouldn't break. Outside, the ER kept running. But inside this small room, time slowed. And when his heat peaked, I kept asking in the lowest voice, You're okay. I'm here. You're breathing right now. Those words held his body, his mind, back to reality slowly. I don't know how much time passed. His breathing steadied little by little. The heat dropped one layer. He leaned into the sofa. I sat on the floor beside him. He said low, "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Nothing to apologize for." He closed his eyes, then opened them again. "Taeyo, I'm scared this will become dependence." I thought for a moment, then said simply, "If it's dependence, it ends when I leave." He looked at me. "Recovery is you being able to breathe alone again. I'm just the person who stays beside that process." His eyes reddened. "Then, yes, I'll learn how to breathe alone again." I nodded. And during that process, I added, "If you need me, call me," he said in a tiny voice. "Protocol?" I didn't laugh. I answered seriously. "Protocol." He smiled. This time, not like crying. The accident scene was chaos. Oil leaking from the overturned tanker truck mixed with rainwater, spreading across the road like rainbow-colored poison. Acrid smoke filled the air, along with the metallic scent of blood and steel. But to paramedic Kang Tae-oh, all of it was nothing more than colorless, scentless data. He was a machine, a precise component that maintained a heart rate of 65 in the middle of a field filled with screams. "Tae-oh, patient number 2 is in cardiac arrest. Move!" Even at the team leader's shout, Tae-oh's eyes did not waver. He skillfully began compressing the patient's chest. Crack! The unpleasant sensation of ribs pressing inward traveled through his palms. But Tae-oh felt nothing. To him, the human body was nothing more and nothing less than organic matter that needed repair. And then, among the medical support team that had just arrived on the scene, a silhouette in a white coat appeared. It was Yoon Seo-ha. At that moment, the silence that ruled Taeyo's world screamed as if it had been torn apart by a piercing high frequency. What? Taeyo's hand stopped for 0.1 seconds, an alpha who could not smell pheromones. His senses, which had lived like barren land his entire life, reacted for the first time to a density they had never encountered before. It was not a scent. It was closer to an electrical signal striking directly through the brain's nerves. Through the cold, damp curtain of rain, only from Yoon Seo-ha, burst an overwhelming surge of fear and suppressed heat. Tae-oh felt a burning pain along the back of his neck, as if a switch that had been turned off his entire life had suddenly been forced on. The sounds of the accident scene, amplified 1,000-fold and slammed into his ears. "I'll take over the patient." "Paramedic Kang Tae-oh." Seo-ha's voice pierced through the rain. Seo-ha stepped beside Tae-oh and bent down to check the patient's condition. In that instant, a single drop of rain fell from Seo-ha's wet hair and landed on the back of Tae-oh's hand. It was hot. It should have been cold rain. But to Tae-oh, it burned like boiling water. "Dr. Yoon Seo-ha," Tae-oh murmured quietly. His voice was lower than usual, heavier. Seo-ha lifted his head and looked at Tae-oh. Seo-ha's eyes had already gone beyond their limit. The early signs of a heat cycle barely suppressed by inhibitors. To others, he simply looked like an overworked doctor. But to Tae-oh, whose senses were beginning to awaken, every pore of Seo-ha's skin releasing desperate signals no longer registered as data, but as desire. "Step aside. This is the golden hour." Seo-ha tried to push Tae-oh away, but Tae-oh didn't move. Instead, he grabbed Seo-ha's wrist. "Dr. Yoon Seo-ha, your pulse is 130, your breathing is shallow, and your pupils are dilated. Let go, please," Seo-ha whispered, lowering his voice as if begging. Around them were countless police officers and paramedics. But now Tae-oh could see no one else. He felt the violent pulse beating beneath the thin skin of Seo-ha's wrist, a disturbingly vivid vitality. And that vitality flowed into Tae-oh's dry veins, making the blood that had been frozen for decades begin to boil. Stability? No. This isn't something that polite. Tae-oh realized something. The strange stillness he had felt beside Seo-ha was not peace, but the eye of a storm just before it explodes. Protocol. Tae-oh brought his lips close to Seo-ha's ear. His hot breath brushed Seo-ha's ear. "When danger signs are detected, immediate rest is required. You are leaving the scene now." Tae-oh practically dragged Seo-ha toward his personal car parked at the edge of the scene. The moment the door shut, the noise of the accident site was cut off. Inside the narrow, sealed car, Seo-ha curled into the seat, breathing roughly. His rain-soaked coat clung to his body, revealing the distinct curves of an omega. "Ha, Kang Tae-oh, this is abuse of authority. Do you know how long I've been holding it together?" Seo-ha shouted, holding back tears. But to Tae-oh, that cry struck him even harder than temptation. Teo sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The veins on the back of his hands bulged as if they might burst. Regaining his senses was not a blessing. It was torture. Like forcing blinding sunlight directly into the eyes of someone who had lived in darkness their entire life. I didn't know the world was this loud. Teo leaned slightly toward Seoha. The sound of the seatbelt unfastening echoed unusually loud. Your breathing sounds like thunder inside my head. The trembling of your skin looks as sharp as blades to my eyes. Teo's hand cupped Seoha's wet cheek. Cold rainwater and burning body heat mixed strangely in his palm. Teo looked down at his own hand. The fingertips that had just wiped the rain from Seoha's face were trembling uncontrollably. Danger. His instincts warned him. But the warning was not that Seoha was dangerous. It meant he himself had entered a state he could no longer control. For Teo, loss of control was equivalent to death. For someone who had lived his entire life at the emotional zero point, this sticky, burning invasion of sensation felt like torture drilling directly into his brain. The air inside the car suddenly expanded. Seoha's scent spiraled through the sealed space. For the first time in his life, Teo perceived a smell not as scent, but as color. Seoha's scent was like shards of transparent glass. If scattered, they cut. If gathered, they stabbed. Teo inhaled sharply. Every breath drove those shards deeper into his lungs. It was painful, yet Teo could not stop breathing. Instead, he inhaled deeper, like a madman, drawing in that scent. Kang Teo, what's wrong? Why are you breathing like that? Seoha grabbed Teo's arm in fear. That touch? Teo's vision flashed white. Where Seoha's fingers touched Teo's forearm, his skin burned as if it had been scorched. But it wasn't the temperature of skin. It was Seoha's emotion, transmitting directly into Teo's nervous system like an electric current. Seoha's fear, Seoha's approaching heat cycle, Seoha's desperation. All of it surged through Teo's veins and struck his brain. Teo gripped the steering wheel tightly. His knuckles turned white as if they might burst. Even his sense of who he was and where he was beginning to blur. This isn't a malfunction. Teo realized something. The peace he had called numbness for the past 30 years had in truth only been a temporary pause. A pause waiting for the key named Yoon Seoha. He lifted the hand gripping the steering wheel and held it before his eyes. Raindrops clung to his trembling fingertips, glittering like jewels in the streetlight. Looking at that light, Teo thought for the first time, beautiful. And at the same time, I think I might die. Joy and terror tore through his brain at once. With a suppressed groan, Teo turned toward Seoha. His eyes were no longer those of a cold data analyst. The edges of his pupils burned red, devouring Seoha like a starving beast. Seoha! Teo's voice was wet. Even that sound rang so clearly and loudly in his own ears that it overwhelmed him. Please don't touch me. Instead of pushing Seoha's hand away, Teo covered it with his own. Then he brought his lips to the hottest pulse beating in Seoha's palm. If I break you right now, it won't be because of you. It'll be because my body has gone for you. Seoha's eyes widened in shock. Something ran down Teo's cheek. Rainwater, cold sweat, or perhaps tears surrendering to emotions he had never felt before. Teo's world was collapsing. Still pressing his lips to Seoha's palm, Teo inhaled sharply. Seoha's scent seeped deep into his lungs, passed through them, and stabbed into the deepest part of his brain. It was not merely a smell. It was the pain of a sensory seal, closed for 30 years, being violently torn open. Teo's lips trembled against Seoha's palm. Inside him, the alpha instinct that had long been suppressed exploded, ignited by Seoha's pheromones. The air inside the car tightened as Teo's presence and Seoha's presence clashed against each other, then slowly began to mix. The moment Teo released his restraint completely, a heavy, commanding scent filled the car. Teo's pheromones like mist in a deep forest, like the dark earth of midnight gently wrapped around Seoha's sharp scent. The unstable heat that had been pouring from Seoha's body slowly began to calm. What soothed Seoha's heat symptoms was not Teo's forceful suppression, but the resonance created as Teo's pheromones blended with Seoha's. Seoha's shallow breathing gradually became steady. The fear in his eyes faded, replaced by a hazy mixture of relief and instinctive longing. Teo lifted his head and looked at Seoha. The world was no longer the same. What spread before Teo's eyes was no longer colorless data. Around Seoha, The transparent shards that had once floated in the air slowly transformed into soft pink mist. That was Seoha's stabilized emotion. Teo stared, entranced by the breathtaking scene unfolding before him. Scent had become color. Color had become emotion. And those emotions knocked directly against his mind. "Seoha, I can see it." Teo's voice was soaked with emotion. He looked down at the raindrops clinging to his fingertips. Moments ago, they had looked only cold. Now, holding Seoha's pheromones, they scattered light like brilliant jewels. "You're glowing." Teo gently wiped the sweat that ran down Seoha's cheek. Wherever his fingertips touched, Seoha's skin reacted, and faint light bloomed again. Their pheromones circulated through each other's bodies like blood. Seoha was no longer trembling. As if entranced, he reached toward Teo's face and cupped his flushed eyes and cheeks. The wall called control that had once stood between them collapsed, and in its place remained only the burning instinct that longed for each other's existence. Now Teo understood. Within this fragrant chaos there was no escaping, and that this was not a malfunction, but the true beginning of life. After returning from the scene, Teo spent 2 full days sick in his private quarters. His brain poured out signals without rest. The sound of leaves rustling outside the window. The distant wail of an ambulance siren passing somewhere far away. Even the faint vibration of electricity running through the walls. Teo wanted to cover his ears and scream. But even harder to endure was the lingering trace of Seoha's scent that occasionally brushed past his nose. That scent was like a parasitic plant growing deep inside Teo's lungs, pulling him toward Seoha. When Teo returned to the hospital, he was no longer the same Kang Tayo as before. Even his steps felt unfamiliar. Every sense in the world seemed to be attacking him. Walking down the hospital corridor, Teo's brow slowly furrowed. Someone's malice was mixed into the air. The unpleasant density of old suppressants, cheap perfume, and the smell of power tangled together. It was Vice Director Park Min-ho, newly appointed. Park Min-ho was standing directly in front of Yoon Seoha. "Dr. Yoon, your recent performance hasn't been very impressive. Being an Omega comes with certain limitations after all, but you still need to think about the reputation of this hospital." The Vice Director's voice was greasy. He tapped Seoha's shoulder while openly releasing his pheromones. Seoha's eyes trembled. Perhaps his suppressants were reaching their limit. His nape had begun to flush faintly red. "Vice Director, I have not made any mistakes in my duties. Please evaluate me based on my performance." Seoha clenched his teeth and endured. But the Vice Director scoffed and grabbed the collar of Seoha's coat. "Performance? Perhaps that weak body of yours is what's hiding your true ability. If your test results are poor, I'll have no choice but to send you to the disciplinary committee." And then, a cold presence rolled down the hallway. The air itself seemed to freeze. Before Park Min-ho could even turn his head, Teo grabbed his wrist. "Remove your hand." Teo's voice was low and dry, but beneath it lurked the growl of a beast. Startled, the Vice Director quickly pulled his hand away. What is the meaning of this? How dare a paramedic? Teo didn't even listen. His eyes were fixed only on Seoha. Seoha's breathing was unstable. Teo could see it, the Vice Director's pheromones tightening around Seoha's throat. Malice like thick, sticky black fog was staining Seoha's white coat. Teo stepped in front of Seoha, blocking him. Then he released just a small amount very carefully of his own alpha pheromones toward the Vice Director. Something that would have been impossible back when he couldn't smell anything. But now he understood exactly what he was releasing. The Vice Director inhaled sharply. Teo's pheromones were a blade meant to protect Seoha. "This is a warning. If I see this kind of contact again, the next response won't be a formal report from the scene. It will be a personal response. You lost your mind? A paramedic threatening a doctor?" The Vice Director stormed away in anger. Even after he left, an unpleasant residue lingered in the hallway. Teo immediately grabbed Seoha's wrist and pulled him toward the emergency stairwell. "Teo, you can't! If someone sees this, the rumors will." "There are things more important than rumors." Teo shut the stairwell door and pushed Seoha gently against the wall. Seoha's breathing was rough. Teo lowered his face toward Seoha's nape. The scent of suppressants, fear, and a sweetness that only Teo could sense from Seoha. "The Vice Director's scent is on you," Teo murmured low beside Seoha's ear. "I want to erase it." Seoha's eyes met Teo's. Teo's gaze was filled with something close to madness. The price of regaining his senses was both terrifying and beautiful. Only now did Teo fully understand it. Seoha grabbed Teo's shoulders tightly. He too was beginning to be infected by Teo's heightened senses. From beyond the corridor came the distant wail of an ambulance siren. The field was calling. But Teo didn't move. Right now, he was trying to pull the one existence capable of saving his world completely into his territory. Seoha leaned his forehead against Teo's shoulder, exhaling the heat caused by the side effects of his suppressants. Instead of answering, Teo gently adjusted the collar of Seoha's coat. Back when he couldn't smell anything, Teo treated patients only as data. But now he could read the density of anxiety rising from Seoha's pores. He could feel the temperature of the humiliation Seoha endured directly against his own skin. "You must not collapse," Teo whispered softly beside Seoha's ear. "If you collapse while I can feel you like this, then my world will collapse with you. So this is for me." It was the most selfish confession, and the most devoted salvation. For the first time, Seoha relaxed the tension in his shoulders within Teo's arms. Even without suppressants, Teo's steady alpha pheromones surrounded him. Teo realized something. His instincts were not trying to devour Seoha. Instead, they were gathering the scattered fragments of Seoha's senses and holding them together. As their breathing slowly overlapped into one rhythm, the unpleasant stench the vice director had left in the corridor vanished as if washed away. This was not a temporary escape. It was the most desperate bond two people could form with each other. The sound of a radio crackling beyond the emergency stairwell was reality pulling them back. Teo pressed a brief kiss to Seoha's forehead and stepped away. Regret and fear surged through him at the same time, but for both of them, the protocol of survival still remained. The scene was hell. Black smoke rose through twisted metal structures, and screams for help erupted from every direction. Teo stepped down from the ambulance and began checking the patients. But among them, something strange caught his attention. "That's odd." Teo paused while examining a patient's arm. The patient's pupils were dilated, and an unidentified rash had spread across the skin. This wasn't a simple traumatic shock. Teo opened his medical bag and searched through the patient's medication pouch. Inside was a suppressant package identical to the one Seoha used. But the logo printed on the package was not from a legitimate pharmaceutical company. Instead, it bore an experimental identification code used by the hospital's research wing. Why is this here? A cold sweat ran down Teo's spine. It wasn't a suppressant. It was a mutated stimulant designed to forcibly amplify a patient's heat cycle and push the body's physical abilities to their extreme limit. And the condition of these patients was exactly the same as the abnormal symptoms Seoha had experienced not long ago. Just then, from the opposite side of the disaster site, the team leader who was directing rescue operations called out to Teo. "Teo, one of the rescue workers collapsed with heat cycle symptoms. Get over here." The moment Teo turned his head, he caught sight of someone in a white coat quickly disappearing into the darkness behind the ambulance. In that instant, Teo knew. Seoha was being used as an experimental subject inside the hospital. The acrid smoke from the collapsed tunnel site stabbed into Teo's lungs. He grabbed the wrist of the fallen rescue worker. The skin was unnaturally hot. This wasn't a normal heat cycle. It felt as though something was boiling inside the bloodstream, an artificially induced rampage. "This is the same as Seoha's." Blood vessels burst red across Teo's eyes. The certainty that Seoha was being used for something lethal inside the hospital's walls. Deep within Teo, the destructive instinct of an alpha that had long slept began to stir. Regaining his senses was not a blessing. It was a curse that forced him to stare directly at every ugliness in the world. The hospital they returned to after handling the scene maintained its usual quiet calm. But to Teo's heightened senses, the hospital looked like a gigantic set of grinding gears. Using his identity as a paramedic, Teo infiltrated the hospital's underground data center. The instincts of a data analyst combined with the persistence of an alpha. When he hacked into the encrypted server, a red graph appeared across the monitor. Project name Omega X. Subject test, subject no. Zero Yun Seoha. Teo's heart dropped. Number 0. Seoha was not simply a doctor. He was the most perfect and most tragic cultivated vessel, raised by the hospital's upper management in order to weaponize Omega pheromones. The pain Seoha had endured, his irregular heartbeat, even the desperate sense of stability Teo had felt around him. All of it had been data designed by someone. And even knowing this, Seoha kept enduring it. Teo's hand trembled as he pulled it away from the mouse. The truth in the data was cruel. Seoha had endured for 5 years, adjusting the levels of his own suppressants to survive this experiment that was slowly consuming him. It was resistance. It was a fight. Teo clutched his head. Suddenly, with a violent pain stabbing through his brain, Fragments of forgotten memories began to pour out like a waterfall. 15 years ago, a massive fire scene. Young Teo had lost his parents and been left abandoned in the ruins, and beside him at that time was a boy who carried a scent similar to Seoha's. It was young Seoha. The two of them had survived by holding each other's hands beneath the collapsed wreckage. We saved each other. The reason Teo had lived his life numb and detached was because the guilt of failing to protect Seoha during that fire had completely shut down the emotional circuits in his brain. Teo's numbness was not an illness. It was a defense mechanism, a way to isolate himself from the terror of losing Seoha. Now everything finally made sense. Why he could only breathe properly beside Seoha. Why the moment he saw Seoha again, his world collapsed. In the hospital break room, Seoha sat alone in the empty space. His hands trembled violently from the side effects of suppressants as he struggled to breathe. Teo quietly approached and wrapped his arms around Seoha from behind. Seoha stiffened in surprise. "Teo? I know everything now." Teo's voice was deeper and lower than usual. He buried his face in the back of Seoha's neck. This time it wasn't confirmation. It was a vow. "I know what you've endured alone for the past 5 years, and why seeing you drove me insane. All of it." Seoha's body collapsed weakly into Teo's arms. Tears streamed down Seoha's cheeks. I was so scared. If they found out I thought they might dispose of me, I won't let them." Teo wiped away Seoha's tears and pressed his forehead gently against Seoha's. "I'll be your shield. No, I'll rebuild your world, so you can live not as this hospital's experiment, but as my partner." The powerful, overwhelming alpha pheromones pouring from Teo's body calmed Seoha's anxiety. Teo was no longer a mechanical paramedic. He had fully regained his senses. And at the center of every one of those senses existed only Yoon Seoha. Seoha buried his face in Teo's chest and sobbed. Teo etched every one of those cries deep into his mind. There was no longer any silence. In Teo's world now, there was only Seoha's music, filling every corner. For Teo, the hospital was no longer the workplace of a paramedic. It had become a massive slaughterhouse that was slowly killing Seoha. Teo opened the back door of the hospital network and slipped inside. All he had were data and facts. Records showing that Seoha's blood samples had been moved every night to the vice director's private laboratory. The neural stimulant compounds mixed into Seoha's suppressants. And the 5 years of suffering Seoha had endured as test subject number 0, now unfolding before Teo as cold data. Teo remained calm. During the years when he had been numb, his habit of processing information like a machine had become the most powerful weapon he now possessed to save Seoha. A way to neutralize the vice director's authority. He traced the flow of illegal clinical trial funding inside the hospital and planted a system that would automatically transmit the data to the servers of an outside news agency. At the same time, Teo began using the countless connections and accident reports he had accumulated as a paramedic to seize and shake the vice director's weaknesses one by one. Then, a faint presence appeared behind him. "Paramedic Kang Tae-ho, what exactly are you doing there?" It was Vice Director Park Min-ho. He stood behind Teo, smiling coldly. The vice director had already realized that Teo was involved with Seoha. Yoon Seoha really is impressive. To think he managed to break a machine without emotions this thoroughly. "I'm not broken." Teo slowly rose from the chair and faced him. "I've been restored." Teo's pheromones filled the room, far stronger and more intense than the fear he had felt at the fire 15 years ago. A killing intent born from the instinct to protect poured from Teo's entire body. "You're releasing alpha pheromones in front of me? A mere paramedic at the bottom of the ladder?" The vice director scoffed and released his own pheromones. The oppressive alpha pheromones of a superior. But Teo did not even blink. Through Seoha, Teo had fully regained his senses. The vice director's pheromones were no longer frightening. To Teo, they were nothing more than a nauseating stench. Teo grabbed the vice director by the collar and slammed him against the wall. Teo's eyes glowed with a strange blue light. "I'm saying this with my life on the line. Every time you lay a hand on Yoon Seoha's body tonight, I will burn away everything you have, piece by piece." Teo snatched the vice director's phone and forcibly deleted the cloud storage containing the clinical data he had been hiding. Then he shoved the screen in front of the vice director's face. "At this very moment, all of your illegal research data is being sent to every member of the hospital's board of directors." The vice director's face turned pale. "Yeah, you insane bastard." Teo threw him down onto the floor and turned away coldly. "This is a warning. Just as you tried to dispose of Seoha, I will dispose of your life. Teo immediately ran toward Seoha's on-call room. Seoha was slumped over his desk, struggling against the burning heat caused by the side effects of suppressants. Seoha! Teo rushed forward and lifted Seoha into his arms. Seoha's skin burned like fire. Without hesitation, Teo wrapped Seoha in his coat. Teo, what did you do? Seoha asked with a trembling voice. Teo wiped the sweat running down Seoha's cheeks and whispered softly, You don't have to endure it anymore. The protocol is over. I'm taking you out of this hell. Where are you taking me? Teo pressed his forehead gently against Seoha's. To the place where you can breathe most comfortably. The place farthest away from the world's senses and from your pain. Holding Seoha in his arms, Teo kicked open the door of the on-call room. Emergency alarms were echoing throughout the hospital corridors. But to Teo, the sound was no longer a threat. Through his restored senses, he could clearly see the safest route for escape. The two of them ran toward the hospital's underground parking garage. Under the pouring rain of the night, Teo's ambulance sped away from the hospital and vanished into the darkness. Their complete escape had begun. In a forest on the outskirts of the hospital stood a small cabin Teo had secretly secured long ago without his team leader knowing. It became the two men's hideout. By the time the distant hospital sirens faded into the sound of rain, Teo was sitting on the cabin's living room sofa with Seoha in his arms. Seoha's heat cycle was spiraling out of control because of the artificially manipulated suppressant chemicals. He burrowed into Teo's chest, letting out suppressed groans. Teo, do you think I'll be okay? What if this experiment has completely ruined my body? Seoha's voice was full of despair. For someone who had spent his entire life wearing the mask of a perfect doctor, the experience of watching his own body collapse beyond his control was more terrifying than death itself. Teo lightly kissed the back of Seoha's hand. Through Teo's senses, Seoha appeared different. Though his body burned with feverish heat, deep within him there still burned the determination of a doctor who wanted to save patients. Like a flame, Teo realized that determination was the most powerful force keeping Seoha alive. You are a doctor. Teo brushed Seoha's damp bangs aside and spoke firmly. What's broken isn't your body. It's the ethics of the people who used you as an experiment. Your medical knowledge, the hands that saved your patients, those are things no one can ever take away from you. They belong only to you. Seoha looked up at Teo. But right now, my body can't even examine a single patient properly. Teo gently cupped Seoha's cheek and met his gaze. Teo's eyes were no longer clouded by omega pheromones. Instead, they shone with the unwavering determination of an alpha determined to protect Seoha completely. I'll fix it. I'll help your body recover. I'll make sure you can wear that white coat again. The hospital you dreamed of, I'll build it for you. A place where no one will ever experiment on you again. For the first time, Seoha let out a quiet sigh of relief. Teo's pheromones filled the cabin. They were not a scent meant to subdue Seoha. They were like a vast forest surrounding him, protecting him, holding him safely inside. The days they spent in the cabin were both the most painful and the most brilliant moments of their lives. Seoha's body reacted unpredictably as his hormones fluctuated wildly. Sometimes he burned with fever. Sometimes he trembled with chills. Every time it happened, Teo never left his side even for a moment. He focused every one of his senses. When Seoha's pulse grew irregular, Teo steadied the rhythm with the pressure of his fingertips. When Seoha's breathing became uneven, Teo synchronized his own breathing with Seoha's until he calmed down. Teo! Seoha clutched tightly at Teo's shirt. Teo lifted him gently into his arms. Every time Seoha's burning skin pressed against his chest, Teo felt his senses tremble. Just endure a little longer, Seoha. It will pass soon. Teo pressed his lips softly to the back of Seoha's neck. With his alpha pheromones, he slowly neutralized the artificially altered hormone levels. It was not domination. It was a bond born from blind devotion to Seoha. After the storm-like night passed, morning sunlight filtered through the cabin windows. The clarity slowly returned to Seoha's eyes. Still within Teo's arms, Seoha stretched gently. The crushing pain in his body had become lighter. Thank you, Teo, Seoha whispered as he buried his face against Teo's chest. I think I can stand again, as long as you're beside me. Teo patted Seoha's back. In Teo's mind, the future was already taking shape. A private clinic, a small but unbreakable sanctuary where Seoha could focus only on saving patients. A hospital that would completely shield Seoha from the prejudice of the world. Teo silently resolved that he would make it a reality. We'll go back to the hospital. But this time, it will be different. This time, they won't be the ones using you. You'll be the one judging them. Teo's voice was cold and resolute. Seoha stepped out of Teo's arms and smiled brightly for the first time. That smile was proof that Seoha was beginning to regain the confidence he once had as a doctor. The world was still chasing after them. But Teo and Seoha now knew something important. As long as they knew how to breathe in rhythm with each other, no external threat would ever be able to break them. Teo, it's time for us to go. Seoha set down the tea Teo had brewed for him. His hands were no longer trembling. Teo had been staring out the window toward the forest path, but he slowly turned his head. How is your body? I'm fine. You completely stabilized my pheromone system. Now I can push away that vice director's filthy aura with my own will. Seoha reached out and took Teo's hand. The firm strength in Seoha's palm pulsed through him. Teo felt his senses beating in rhythm with Seoha's determination. We're not going back for revenge, Seoha added quietly. Just like they used me as an experiment, I'm going back to destroy their system. As a doctor, I'm taking back my place. Teo studied Seoha's resolve. He no longer saw Seoha as test subject 0, someone who needed protection. Seoha was the strongest partner standing beside him. Meanwhile, the hospital was still trying to hide the fact that Teo and Seoha had disappeared. But the data Teo had already leaked to outside media outlets and judicial authorities had begun shaking the hospital's board of directors. Without disguises, the two of them walked boldly through the hospital's front entrance. The nurses and doctors in the lobby froze in shock when they saw them. With Seoha's arm linked through Teo's, Seoha lifted his head proudly and walked straight down the emergency department corridor. Dr. Yoon Seoha? Someone's trembling voice echoed. Seoha glanced toward the colleagues staring at him with disbelief. Then he gave them a very brief but confident smile. I'm returning to duty. Vice Director Park Minho faced Seoha inside his office. His face twisted with fury. Yoon Seoha, how dare you crawl back here? I've recovered all the data you stole. You're finished now. Just as the vice director reached to press the call bell, Seoha calmly tossed a document envelope onto the desk. Vice Director, that data has already been handed over to the prosecution. And at this exact moment, every record of your research and illegal funding flow is being transmitted to the board's server. What? The vice director's face drained of color. Teo stepped behind him. Teo's pheromones completely filled the office. Overwhelmed by the crushing pressure, the vice director collapsed to the floor, unable to even breathe properly. This hospital no longer belongs to you. Teo spoke quietly. And Dr. Yoon Seoha is not an experiment you can discard whenever you like. He's the only physician here capable of holding this hospital together. Seoha looked down at the vice director and delivered the final blow. Vice Director, your medical license and your position as hospital director will disappear in 10 minutes. I've already released all of your treatment records, including what you've done to your patients. The vice director could not say a single word. By the time Teo and Seoha stepped out of the office, police officers were already flooding the hallway. Teo tightened his grip on Seoha's hand. Their revenge had not been completed through screams or violence, but through the perfect collapse of a corrupt system. The place where the storm had swept through was, surprisingly, quiet. After Vice Director Park Minho was arrested and the masterminds behind the illegal clinical trials were exposed, the hospital fell into a temporary state of paralysis. But for Seoha, that stillness was exactly what he needed. On the day the label of test subject, which had bound him for the past 5 years, was officially discarded, Seoha stood not in the emergency department office, but in the rooftop garden. Teo stood silently behind him, watching over him. Seoha took a deep breath. It was a breath untouched by the chemical irritation of suppressants or the fear of a heat cycle that could erupt at any moment. It was simply his own breath. Teo. Yes, this scent, I think this must be my real pheromone. Seoha smiled softly. This smile was no longer the small, fragile one that used to hide behind a mask. Teo stepped closer to him and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. The pheromones flowing between them were no longer sharp blades, but a gentle wave synchronizing their heartbeats. You are no longer a test subject, nor someone being chased by something. You are simply Yoon Seoha. At Teo's words, Seoha turned around and buried his face in Teo's chest. The people at the hospital look at me differently now. They're not afraid of me anymore. They've started to respect me. They feared you not because you were an Omega, Teo said quietly, but because you were far stronger than they were. Tayo gently stroked Seoha's hair. He now knew better than anyone where Seoha's senses would tremble and where they would find peace. This was no longer instinct. It was a deep understanding built from sharing each other's lives. Seoha stepped out of Tayo's arms and took a small notebook out of his pocket. Inside were pages filled with the blueprint of the private clinic Seoha had dreamed of for years. Tayo, I've decided. Instead of staying in this hospital, I'm going to open my own clinic, even if it's small. Seoha's eyes were shining, a place where it doesn't matter if someone is an omega, an alpha, or anyone else. A place where people who are sick don't have to hide anything and can come comfortably. And most of all, a place where people who had to become tools for experiments, like I did, can always feel safe receiving treatment. Tayo carefully examined the blueprint. Seoha's plan was precise, and his medical values were clearly reflected in it. Tayo immediately took out his phone and checked something. You'll need funding. Huh? Wait, why are you already worrying about that? Tayo took Seoha's hand and slightly lifted the corner of his lips. During the years when he had lived in emotional numbness, Tayo had developed the habit of perfect data management and meticulous risk prevention. Because of that, he had accumulated a considerable amount of assets. According to my data, Tayo said calmly, with your ability, this will become the most trusted clinic in this region within 3 years. I will appoint myself as your investor, your head of security, and your closest protector. Seoha's eyes widened. Protector? Yes. While you treat patients, I will protect you from every noise outside the hospital. That will be my new protocol. That evening, the two of them had dinner at a quiet restaurant near the hospital. Looking out the rain-streaked window, Seoha spoke. In the past, whenever it rained, the sound of sirens felt so sharp it drove me crazy. Seoha took Tayo's hand, but now it just sounds like rain. Tayo held Seoha's hand tightly. He no longer denied that every sensation he felt through Seoha made him feel alive. Tayo's world was no longer a bundle of colorless data. This everyday life with Seoha was restoring every color he had lost throughout his life. From now on, even the sound of rain, the sound of sirens, and the hospital alarms, if I'm with you, they will all sound like music. The two of them left the restaurant and began walking in the rain. There was no longer any reason to hide, no reason to run away. Leaning on each other's warmth and walking together was enough. Seoha's clinic was slowly becoming reality. Seoha Clinic. The sign hanging on the first floor of a small but tidy building in the middle of the city had become Seoha's new source of pride. Inside the clinic, the scent of clean disinfectant was always mixed with the warm aroma of tea. The sounds of patients were no longer sharp screams. They felt like the ordinary warmth of living people going about their lives. It was a rainy night. After finishing his appointments, Seoha was pouring tea in the small staff kitchen when Tayo, who had been preparing to leave work, quietly approached and wrapped his arms around Seoha's waist. Seoha, may I ask you something? Do you remember anything about the fire 15 years ago? Seoha set down the teacup and leaned against Tayo's shoulder. Why are you suddenly asking about that? Of course I remember. It was too horrible to forget, even though I tried. I was trapped under the collapsed debris for a long time, crying until I was finally rescued. Tayo gently stroked Seoha's hair and slowly began revealing the past he had kept buried for years. There was a child beside you back then, a child who held your trembling hand and tried not to cry until the rescue team arrived. That child was me, Kang Tayo. Seoha turned to look at him. His eyes shook violently with shock. Tayo calmly confessed the reason why all of his senses had once gone numb. The 15 years he had imprisoned himself in guilt after believing he had failed to protect Seoha in that fire. Because I thought I had lost you, my world lost all its color from that day 15 years ago, and when you appeared again, the reason I reacted to you so instantly was probably because my instincts had been waiting for you all those years. A tear fell from Seoha's eyes. The child that was you, the one who refused to let go of my hand in the middle of the flames. Seoha buried his face in Tayo's chest and cried for a long time. Those were not tears of sadness. It was a ritual of cleansing, washing away the guilt and fear that had bound them both to that tragic moment 15 years ago. I thought you were the one who saved me. I endured until the rescue team came because of that warmth. Seoha lifted his head and looked straight into Tayo's eyes. So this means the promise from 15 years ago has finally been completed. Back then, we saved each other. But now we're saving each other's lives. Tayo wiped the tears running down Seoha's cheeks with his thumb and focused all of his senses on him. In this moment, Tayo no longer felt the choking smoke from 15 years ago, nor the hollow numbness of the years that followed. All that existed was the warm body of Yoon Seo-ha standing before him, and the gentle voice calling his name. Tayo took a small metal key out of his pocket and placed it in Seo-ha's hand. It was the key to the door that led to the small living space the two of them had prepared on the second floor of the newly opened clinic. The past is nothing but ruins now. We should live today and plan for tomorrow. Seo-ha tightened his grip on the key. No matter what kind of patient comes, no matter what kind of crisis appears, if you're beside me, I'm not afraid anymore. Seo-ha wrapped his arms around Tayo's neck and whispered softly, "Let's live here for a long time, taking care of patients and taking care of each other's wounds." Tayo pressed a long kiss to Seo-ha's forehead. The sound of rain outside the window was no longer a threatening siren. It had become a peaceful piece of background music, blessing the future the two of them would now live together. What the fire from 15 years ago had left behind was not ashes. It was the strongest spark they had ever carried for each other. And now, inside the small sanctuary called Seo-ha Clinic, that spark was burning brighter and warmer than anywhere else in the world. On a rainy afternoon, the glass windows of Seo-ha Clinic were fogged over with a thin layer of white condensation. The low conversations of patients sitting in the waiting room blended gently with the sound of rain, flowing together like warm background music. Tayo was sitting behind the reception desk, monitoring the clinic's security system and external network on his tablet. But more than 90% of his attention was fixed on the door of the consultation room. Every time the door opened and Yoon Seo-ha walked out wearing his white coat, Tayo's neural system tightened like a drawn wire, then slowly relaxed again. It was the present form of that stubborn instinct from 15 years ago, the one that had refused to let go of Seo-ha's hand in the middle of the fire. "Here's the list of today's scheduled patients. I've reviewed everything." Seo-ha stepped out of the consultation room and stood beside Tayo. With one hand tucked into the pocket of his coat, he leaned lightly against Tayo's shoulder. "You did well today. All the patients' blood pressure and respiratory conditions were stable." Tayo stepped closer to him and gently fixed Seo-ha's slightly messy hair. Seo-ha had grown strong enough to control his heat cycle on his own now, even without Tayo's help. Tayo had changed as well. He no longer heard every sound in the world amplified and overwhelming. Instead, he had learned how to tune himself to the single clearest frequency in existence, Seo-ha's breathing. "Tayo, sometimes this ordinary life still feels unreal. Sometimes I wonder if the hell we went through back then wasn't just a dream." Seo-ha took Tayo's hand and intertwined their fingers. "If it were a dream," Tayo said quietly, "I would never wake up." Tayo let out a soft laugh. The warmth he felt between Seo-ha's fingers. Once, his hands had been nothing more than numb circuits. Now they had become the most perfect sensory organ, capable of reading Seo-ha's body temperature in real time. On their way home from work, the two of them walked down the small alley in front of the clinic. The smell of rainwater, damp soil, and delicious food drifting from a neighbor's house filled the air. Seo-ha suddenly stopped and looked up at the falling raindrops. 15 years ago, the smell of ashes from the fire and the burning terror had filled his senses. But now, the cool and clean rain completely washed those memories away. "Tayo." For the first time, Seo-ha called him by his name. Tayo's heart jolted violently. "I can breathe now. It's because of you. Thank you for giving color to my world." Tayo gazed steadily into Seo-ha's eyes. Inside them, there was no longer the anxious child from 15 years ago. No trace of the suffering he had endured as a test subject. All Tayo could see now was Seo-ha standing beside him in this moment. "As long as you are by my side," Tayo said quietly, "the colors of my world will never fade." Tayo pulled Seo-ha closer and kissed him lightly in the rain. Raindrops fell over their heads, but they didn't feel cold at all. Instead, their warmth pierced through the falling rain and seeped deep beneath their skin. When they returned to the clinic, the two of them sat side by side in the small living room on the second floor. The city lights outside the window were not particularly dazzling, but this place where their breathing met and blended was the largest and safest universe the two of them could ever know. Tayo gently rubbed the small scar on the back of Seo-ha's hand with his thumb. It had once been a mark of the past, a trace of survival from everything they had endured. But now it was no longer a symbol of pain. "We are not perfect," Tayo said it calmly. "Sometimes I'm still afraid of the noise of the world, and sometimes you'll still struggle when shadows of the past suddenly return. But," Tayo met Seo-ha's eyes, "because of those imperfections, we found each other, and we were able to become each other's only salvation." Perfect things break easily, but we will spend our lives filling each other's emptiness. Seoha smiled and sank deeply into Tayo's arms. Tayo's steady heartbeat echoed gently against Seoha's back. The sound of sirens no longer threatened them. It was nothing more than the sound of a city full of people living their lives. Guided by each other's breathing, the two of them began to move forward toward the future, slowly and at a pace that would never stop. Forever. Hello, this is Seoulmuse. Thank you for listening to today's episode. The uncensored version of their more intimate moments is available in full on Patreon. Don't forget to subscribe and join me. Thank you for watching.